Okay. Cool. Cool. All right. We're recording. Got it rolling. So I'm ready if you are.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, Dots. Thank you so much for coming on the Metrics and Chill podcast. I'm looking forward to coming on your show. Like we talked about, this will be super fun to and now I'll be following you on LinkedIn and everything. I have to kick it off this way. We normally don't do like long intros or anything. We kind of jump right into it. But I have to say, in preparation for the interview, I was listening. You just did a killer interview with, it was Chris Walker and Sangram, was it?
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
Yeah, great interview on Go to Market. So I linked to it in my show notes, and we've got to drop that in there for people to go listen to. That was a great conversation that you fostered. So now I feel a little intimidated because I'm like, oh, this dude can interview. So
Yeah, I mean it was an honor, I won't lie, and I hope to do things like that like every quarter. So watch out for the next set of guests. But yes, it was really fun. Some revelations that were shared. Something, I try to simulate this boxing match where people are sort of going back and forth and, having their own opinions on things. But yeah, you're right. Folks should really check it out. Again, really happy to be on this show. You may or may not believe it's been a fan for a while myself, of you. So
I don't. I don't believe it.
It's just been great for me in general, and nice to see that you're also doing very well.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. And yeah, can't wait to come and talk product marketing on your show. All right, so today for listeners, we're going to talk with Dots a little bit about translating product marketing activities into unit economics, or maybe put differently, measurable business metrics that guide decision making and all kinds of like outcomes for the business. Or maybe to put it differently, how to use data to measure and optimize marketing strategies for better business outcomes. So we've got a number of questions here. I guess, and this will be fun for me because we don't have a lot of product marketing folks on the show, so this will be fun for me to dive into. Let's start here. What are some of the key metrics that you believe companies should be tracking, or that you personally track for product marketing? You alluded, in kind of our build up to this, you've got some North Star metrics and then some other metrics for unit economics. What are some of those, and how do you define them?
Yeah, first, before I answer that question, I really love the name of your podcast, Metrics and Chill. You never chill in the face of metrics, but let's see. I guess with Databox, you will. But yeah, very great question there. I personally have, and I'm not trying to sound contrarian, in the first, impression of this episode, but I think I'm starting to see North Star metrics for product marketing or commercial work very differently, and while I guess most of the questions here will be answered from a B2B perspective, some of those are also important in B2C, D2C, and so on and so forth. So to get straight to the point here, personally, my favorite metric of all time is lifetime value. Some will say it's a made-up metric. And people say that because there is no one way to measure lifetime value for everybody. Your situation is different. Yes, there are formulas for it, but your situation is different. But I feel that for any brand anywhere on earth, you need to have a picture of how much you can get from this single customer. Mm-hmm. Now you can look at that from an entity, or from an angle of the units. So the units of that product, or just from the customer itself, right? I'll give you a very everyday example. My 6-year-old is in a activity, extracurricular, called Keystrong. I think it started in the US, Canadian franchise. And in my head, I'm like, I know the lifetime value for my kid as a unit, because she needs to do this for a set period of time. They have like a track. And once you do it, you've churned, right? And as a customer with multiple units, I have an idea of the lifetime value as well, which is why when you're calculating lifetime value, you should look at lifetime value per unit, my daughter, and lifetime value per customer, me. Because, spoiler alert, I might have a second child very soon.
Congratulations.
And that becomes, thank you, that becomes a another unit that will go into the Kid Strong program. So Kid Strong is saying, oh, the average Canadian has 2 to 3 kids. If these kids spend 4 years, which is what it is, through that program on this recurring subscription, then this is the amount of value it is. I don't think there is anything made up about it. Maybe it's been misinterpreted in some ways. Doesn't show that, it doesn't mean it's made up. The only thing you just need to do is know what lifetime value is for your organization and make sure you are looking at lifetime value per unit and lifetime value per customer. Now I've spoken a lot about lifetime value. let me speak just one more. So personally, I know in B2B, there's a lot about pipeline because why not? Sales journeys are very long, but the business leaders are not, they are not willing to wait that long for accountability. So came up pipeline. And if somebody were to talk about made up metrics, I would say that pipeline is probably one of those made up metrics. Now, I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm not saying it doesn't help. There are many other things to marketing. They're just doing marketing work. You have to convince people. In some cases, you have to deceive people for the greater good. But pipeline is not revenue, right? And as a transparent strategist, you want to be able to look at other deeper things beyond, say, demos. You want to be able to look at deeper things like free trials. You want to be able to look at deeper things like paid trials, if there's anything like that. But you have to look at deeper things like the revenue that is closed itself better than pipeline. And marketers should start to, work their unit economies to affect this type of KPIs. Some of the other types of KPIs that I have a bit of an issue with, but I love if done well, is average contract value. If you optimize for average contract value, it's great if you get a very high average contract value in the first interaction, but I would dare say that there is a high correlation between high average contract value and churn rate. Because people, when they have money, they give you all their money, right? And when there's a slight recession, they are looking for the first thing to cut. And then they get angry spending money with you. And in that anger, they churn immediately. Why not come up with a smaller average contract value that then rises in lifetime value across the lifetime of that company or across the lifetime of that customer, right? Even if in B2C, like I said, but B2B here, like as they grow, then you are growing with them, they are expanding revenue with you. I feel is a much better approach, and it's better than just trying to strive for the highest lifetime value and people buying more than what they need at the first interaction. And even if there is a recession, they're not going to churn because they've grown with you at their pace. So they know that they are buying this thing for what they need. So just to recap, lifetime value is my favorite. I think we need to look at, we need to put ourselves more in the bottomless pit, if you like, and chill while we do that with regards to pipeline and be more accountable. And also let's rethink average contract values.
I like this. This reminds me of, like, I think in the interview with Chris, you made this statement too, that pipeline is what you had this good point, and I was like, oh, this is kind of true. Like, I see this on LinkedIn. For a long time, marketers would sort of like on their resumes and stuff, right? They would put like more leading metrics. It'd be like grew brand impressions this much, or grew like whatever they could measure.
Plenty
it was more
zeros.
we would go, like, whatever looks good that we could put as like a leading metric. And then now with the move, like, everyone's talking pipeline, but your point is like that's become the new, like, in some ways, vanity metric. Marketers are being like, oh, this much in pipeline. But, in your interview, like I said, which was excellent, is more like, yeah, but are you acquiring them profitably? Or is this like a sustainable growth thing for your company? Or because you can define pipeline any number of ways.
Exactly. You can define pipeline any number of ways. I've spoken to salespeople about this, very experienced salespeople, and I think they agree with me. Of course, no salespeople will agree with me because all they see is money. But it's how we should think as well. There are times where I'm in deals, especially when you're selling agency products or selling ad tech products, and we have this great meeting with this great, Fortune 100 company or whatever it is. I'm like, woo, that's great. Or Magnificent Seven. There was a case of that. And the sales guy says, hey, my man, until they sign and pay, maybe at least sign, there's no money yet. So we need to start thinking about that when it comes to market. It's uncomfortable, but given that marketing is a risky business, I personally feel it will most likely get you fired less than just sticking to pipeline. Because before they fire you, they will know that you had the revenue mindset from day one, and you are doing what you can. And if they fire you, they'll most likely not find a better replacement, because you can't do more than what you're already doing, right? But if it's pipeline, they know that you're just working with the ether, and you are most likely like, I've done my bit. It's up to sales. Instead of you working with sales, because that's what it takes to drive deeper metrics than pipeline. Even though it's stressful to do that, I completely understand. And it doesn't look good, like you said, on your resume. If you say you drove this number, a smaller number of revenue versus a higher pipeline count. So as a marketer in general, are you trying to help people? Are you getting their jobs done? There's this Harvard concept of the job to be done. Are you getting their jobs done? That is all that it comes to, And if you're getting your jobs done, then you need to focus on what really matters, and still be smart about it.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious how you think about some of these metrics. So like LTV, ACV. I like what you allude to here. So some of these deeper, like instead of generically like pipeline, maybe like free trials, paid trials, things like that, right? We track a lot of this at Databox, like product qualified leads, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. In what are the ways that in your mind, like product marketing specifically works with these metrics with the rest of the organization? Like you alluded, like this informs all kinds of decisions, right? It informs go-to-market strategy a little bit. I'd love to hear your take on that, but also like, who do you think, is this like completely equally shared? Is one or two teams especially owning things like LTV and saying like, let's find ways to increase this? What's your perspective on like how these metrics should be shared among the team dynamic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, I know we focused on a few metrics here, but there are other ones like net revenue and so on. This is just dots and the metrics that is thinks about at 2 a.m. in the night when everybody else is sleeping. But back to your question, I see this in two ways. There are millions of ways to explain this, but immediately I see this in two ways. The first thing I see is through when you're trying to achieve this through GTM motions. Actually, let me take a step back. It's a different thing when you're the guest of a show than you're interviewing. So everybody should work on that one shared goal. You might have your marketing leading indicators, but the lagging indicators, which are the most important, should be shared goals. So I think there's not much to say on that. Now, next is what I term from a product marketing methodology is the GTM motions or revenue streams. And these affects a lot of things. They affect, product marketing principles like pricing, positioning, even messaging, competitive intelligence, and all that fun stuff. Personally, I know of roughly like 5. There's no right or wrong answer because everybody's still discovering this, of these motions. One of them is inbound. The other is outbound. To make marketers feel comfortable about that, you could call it prospecting or account-based marketing, which is outbound. There's partnership. There is community. So inbound, outbound. Yeah, and then the last one being product-led growth. Some people might put events as a different GTM motion. I'm still back and forth with that. I literally had a conversation today with Sangram Verge about that because he released a newsletter focused on GTM motions. But sometimes something in me is saying, is marketing not a tactic within inbound or outbound, or maybe it deserves its own. I don't know, right? Some will also say ABM, or as I often tell Mason Cosby, ABX is probably is all different, GTM motion as well. I wouldn't dive too deep on what these are. So if you're listening or watching, just try to learn more of what those are. But I typically will make my projections based on those things. Now, you might have a team that is working on multiple GTM motions or a single GTM motions, or some people would, however way you structure that team. But I think we just need to be careful to keep things cohesive. Everybody must know about what everybody else is doing. And I think that's the rant between some of the top leaders out there to say, there's no silo, there's no four-wheel attribution, linear attribution. Like, everything is data-driven attribution. It's everybody's working together, interwoven to fit in with each of those GTM motions. Now, the second thing I would like to talk about is the marketing approaches, if you like. And I think this is where you might have seen me trying to box Chris Walker in the live stream. But let's just put it this way, just to come down to earth, right? Because there are marketers that would eventually grow into business leaders. I think that's the trend now, and I don't see any reason why you shouldn't see things from a business leader perspective. But for the younger marketers who are still learning marketing or doing marketing, there are three, I believe, approaches: brand awareness, right, which is not very common in B2B. Liam Moroni, I may have misspelled that surname very well, to mispronounce that. The king of brand marketing, B2B, is written extensively about this. So you want to be able to check. But basically, it's just telling the story about the brand, telling the story about the brand's aspiration. On Saturday, I was reminded by my memory about the Volvo split campaign that had the Enya soundtrack in it, featuring Van Damme. That was a brand awareness campaign telling a specific story to B2B trucking industry, if you like, about why they should buy their Volvo, right? They didn't need to do all that shenanigans. They could have just said, buy the Volvo, it does auto reversal, but they had to bring Van Damme to do what it did, So that's brand. Then demand, because often, unfortunately, people rarely answer these questions based on the tactics. Demand is everything you do to drive consideration, for the customer, right? Brand marketing is driving awareness. Demand is driving consideration, which is why some people are starting to say demand creation, because they are explaining something different. But demand generation is still valid, and that helps to drive consideration. Everything you do, from a podcast like this to, content, written content, audio content, video content, that does a lot of education, those are the things that fall within that demand generation, so that when it's time for those people to get into market, as they often talk about the 95 to 5%, people see that differently too. They are seeing your brand first, right? You are not the sixth brand in the conversation. You are probably in the top three because of the kind of, solution that you can provide to specific jobs to be done. Then when you move to that, you also go to performance marketing. Performance marketing is the conversion-driven marketing. It's the lead gen. It's the free trial. It's the demo request. It's all those things. It's that in marketing initiative that drives decision. It's time for you to engage. Let's do this, right? So, depending on what GTM motion or even marketing channel you are using, I will personally say try to have this work in unison, because what some people will do is they will run performance marketing only, and it's not their fault. There's pressure, right? I've seen the scars myself, up and down the marketing journey, and then they leave other things. Some will do demand gen and just performance marketing. Some will do brand and demand gen. It has to be the three. You can't tell me that what Volvo did with their brand marketing didn't drive sales for their Volvo product. Indeed, it may have happened in the long term because there is like attribution lag, but it definitely did drive something to that. And because my T shape is in paid media, even though I can do GTM and PMM very well, and in paid media, for example, you want to do that brand awareness campaign, whether it's in phygital or physical or digital, capture that audience somehow, and engage that audience in the demand gen. Whether you are using all these owned attribution models or activating your audiences through B2B or Clay or whatever it is, you capture those audiences, whether at an aggregate or personal level, and then engage them on the performance side, through ads as well. So it's almost like a multi-layered, some of the LinkedIn gods, a few of them I also know, talk about this multi-layered approach, right? Bottom funnel, middle funnel, top of funnel, right? Mm-hmm. But you are transferring those audiences in between that journey, giving them time, and then engaging them accordingly. Now, within the performance side, you might have other things happening, like prospecting, like as Chris Walker said in that live stream, and some of this other stuff. You might have all that happening within the performance side. You might have a lot of ABM enrichment and Sixth Sense going on in the demand side. That's why I said, of course, you cannot work alone. You have to work with some of the other members within the commercial team, right? But personally, I see this this is the Trinity. Like, it's so practical. It works for all, even product-led growth. It works for those kinds of motions as well. So personally, your marketing approaches, your GTM motions are very key to driving those, KPIs that we had, mentioned before. If you are on the corporate side, of product marketing and you're trying to drive success, down the line, we can speak on some of the politics that go on and how to get those things through for the greater good.
So yeah, this is super helpful. I love that you laid out, like, this is a really great framework to think about the go-to-market motions. I'm just like taking notes here. I've got on the left side the go-to-market motions and on the right the marketing approaches, and yeah, the interplay between them. So like in your mind with the marketing approaches, it seems like this is what you're describing as almost like, is this a fair summary where like brand awareness, its primary goal is to build awareness of like, and familiarity. Like, I know, like, I'll take an example that's been on my radar a lot, which is Clay. I feel like at least in my LinkedIn feed and my like world, right? Like as a product marketer, I'm not familiar with like every tool in the world, but all of a sudden Clay seems like it came out of nowhere. And for me, it started as like brand awareness. It was like, I just started seeing the name a lot. I got familiar with the name. I would not say it was like, I have made a distinction maybe similar to you where like I consider the act of generating demand a little more specific like than brand, where like I think a lot of times that's where people get confused is like when brand or like demand gen is done like brand, but it's not actually generating like demand there. You're not really communicating like the pain that it solves, the problem it solves, or like whatever. So I feel like for me, Clay started as like, okay, I'm recognizing them. I'm seeing the logo. I like, okay, like, I didn't visit the website or anything. And then I start seeing like maybe more and more around like use cases. And I'm not in market for a solution yet, right? So I'm just seeing use cases in my feed on LinkedIn. Like, oh, here's some videos of what it can do. Or it's maybe like generating demand for the way it's like casting a vision for the kinds of things you can do with Clay at your company. Again, I have no need to do any of this stuff yet, so I'm just taking it all in and sitting on it. And then like now I maybe am getting hit with like retargeting. I'm being shown like case studies. Now we're in performance marketing land. And when I move from not in market for a solution to like, oh, it's time to work, with Brian in sales on some data enrichment and some new flows we want to do with the BD team. Now I'm going to clay.com. And now I'm saying like, they're the top of my short list and let's see like what they can do in some of the use cases. So is that like maybe an example of like, would you say brand awareness is like familiarity, recognition, then demand is like what can it do for you, some use cases, the pains it solves, and getting you interested in that, like you said, driving consideration of testing it someday. And then would you say performance is like bringing it home? Like once they move from not in market to in market, it's time to close them, whether that's through like case studies or sales outreach or whatever.
Absolutely, you're spot on, and I will stick on the clear example here. They've got things like their brand identity, everything is like clear. They've got folks like Abide, or I don't know if I got that name right, and can't remember this guy. He calls himself the worst marketer in the world.
Todd Clouser, shout out Obaid and Todd.
Yeah. So because okay, let me not break up my story because I have another story myself about Clay specifically. It's very, very key in all of these marketing approaches as a marketer, or even as a marketer with a business acumen, to think production and distribution. Some of the problems I see before I get into the clear example is there's a law of production. Sixth Sense is one of them. They have one of the best ads. They brought in a rapper to do an ad. Somebody was frying an egg. If you go into their YouTube, there's tons of great 1980s content, but there's no distribution because they felt brand awareness is only good for production. Let's make the logo. Let's create some nice ads. Maybe you spent a lot of money on the ads and hope for the best. Where we need to spend money on distribution is demand. Even demand, we are begging everybody to promote their podcast, promote their blog, and so forth. Performance marketing is where the ultimate distribution is, which I completely get. But I digress. Clay, they've got all these nice things going on the brand awareness side. Some storytelling that is not even related to the product, just to know that Clay exists. And they are able to build Clay as an entity within digital marketing space itself, because there's Clay, the actual Clay, and there's also Clay, the company entity. For search engines like Google Trends to spot things like that, it takes a lot of brand awareness work from the team to do things like that. They just raised some money, so there was like huge PR, and so on and so forth, right? So there's that. There is the consideration bit they did. Again, you've mentioned all the use cases. I personally saw they had this like Clay University, which I just concluded like last month. You're right. It's not like I need their product right now, but I found them as a cheaper alternative to some of the other big guns out there, who might also be doing great, but on the product marketing side, maybe their pricing strategy is up market. But Clay is more like, we peasants, if you like, if you, this is how to get by. But they have this great university of courses. They have all these other stuff that you mentioned, right? That they use to engage people, even though they are not ready, right? But then, of course, whenever you're ready, you're thinking about them first because of all the previous efforts that has been shown, and because of every other product marketing factor that they have also considered, for you as their ICP, if you like. So even without me using it, this is what demand gen does and brand, Jeremiah. Even if you're not using an app, because they are so good with their brand and demand, especially brand, you recommend them to other people. Even though till now I've not really used Clay as much, I've recommended it to at least 4 or 5 sales teams to use. I've had some stints in SDR in my past life. I'm like, remember those days when I would do SDR and you did that manually? Here is Clay. That is the level you want to get with your brand. So much so that even if people are not ready to use your brand, they are ready to spread the word and talk about it to others who might need it. And they themselves will hope one day they are going to need it. So again, those things are sometimes hard to measure on unit economics, but they are often feeding other, North Star metrics, if you like. But that was my story about Clay. And I know sometimes when you talk about SaaS, you tend to talk about MarTech, but this applies to any software, and it's why B2C campaigns are very successful. It's why Liquid Death, sells sugar water just like everybody else. But before you remember any brand at all is Liquid Death. So
And then this gets into what you were saying earlier, which is this impacts all these motions. Like this, like a good, like this marketing approach, this threefold marketing approach, when done really well, is making inbound easier. Outbound's getting easier because if they do outbound, it's like, oh, I recognize that name and that logo and that person hitting me up on LinkedIn. So the response rate's going to be a little bit higher. Or like community and events, it's like you want to be a part of that more. Like if there's a partner approach, right? Like Clay has a partner program, right? So yeah, I mean, it makes sense how these things like interplay together. And then would you say in your mind then the ultimate measurement of all of this stuff is these metrics we talked about in the very beginning? Like, as a result, you're looking at like making sure that the motions you're doing and the marketing approach that you're using is in line with a sustainable, efficient, profitable, like it's keeping all these like health metrics in mind of annual contract value, lifetime value, net revenue, all of these like bottom of funnel metrics.
Yes, and just to add to what you said, because of that unity that is being preached all over the business world today, especially on the B2B side, it also helps with your overhead in general, right? You don't have to fragment your team or fragment your resources because everybody specialized, they're in their zone, that kind of a thing. You don't have to do that. You can have one person with the help of AI do multiple things, not because you are trying to overwork that person or burn them out, but because it helps them to see the context, as to how the business is growing in general and how their work influences that in general, right? Even if you're a junior person, you need to know about all the other GTM motions. You need to know about all the marketing approaches that are supporting those GTM motions. And now you are able to connect the dots, which is why I like my name a lot. Unfortunately, connecting the dots is trademarked. How all those fit together to move, the company forward, to continue to drive customer success, and so on and so forth. So I agree when people talk about, let's not over fragment this thing as we should. CEOs getting involved and running this as efficiently and as profitable as possible. Obviously, AI is going to play a huge role, if it's not already, in making these things easier for people and having enterprises sort of organize themselves like a startup, right? Where everything is involved, it's almost like a parallel structure, especially when the work is going on, and all those things required to get those things, moving. So that's kind of how I see it. And it's not comfortable, but I think if you're on this pod and you want to kind of be in the 1%, like Jeremiah is, you want to look at some of these things, that we're discussing here and take on that responsibility with great power. Responsibility.
As they say. All right, my last question, and I'll let you go. But I'm curious, just some maybe like parting advice for listeners who, want to start to look at this. Like you've got the benefit of not just like your years and years of experience actually in the seat doing the work, but also then like chatting with all these experts. I'm curious your advice on like, I guess one way I want to ask it is like maybe common mistakes people make when they try and do this. But another way it might be like advice to help them do it well. Like for example, is there advice around like, should you not try and take all these marketing approaches at once? Like, should you be focused on like, is that too much to bite off? And should people be focused on like, let's just get brand awareness right? And how do they think about measuring that to know like that's going well? And then, because each of these things are surely measured a different way, even though at the bottom, you're still looking at LTV, ACV, all these things. So like, how do you think about breaking up like, what's advice around like which marketing approaches to start with? Should you try and do them all at once? Should you not? And same question around go-to-market motions. Like, it seems like you've got to get like one working. So it's like, what's the order here, right? That's what I'm taking a long time to ask this question, but
no. There's no silver bullet, of course. So, but that said, it almost feels like everything starts with product-led growth. Stretch the product to the point of what it can do by itself, or by some little assistance, if you like, and get that moving there. Then you can start to add, all other, motions as they come. In some cases, whether you grow to 1 billion or go public, you might not even have to use all the GTA motions, all 5 or 7, as is being debated right now. You might just need to use maybe 4, maybe 3. It all depends on your product to market fit. That's the other thing that we haven't mentioned on this episode. So you want to look at that, as well. Personally, I think, and this is a bit controversial, that even if you have a $10,000 per year marketing budget, and I don't know any brand that would have that in the world these days, you should still use the 3 marketing approaches. Some of them you have to execute through sweat equity, which is why people are saying you don't have to create a highly polished video to get certain things done and things like that. And some of those you have to then invest money on, and so on and so forth. So that's what I think. I've met people who will be like, oh, why not start with the performance channels first? Why are you including Reddit, for example? I'm like, guys, it might just be one Reddit post, one Reddit conversation that will skyrocket your business. It was on Reddit that the Wall Street Bets community was built, and they literally shook the finance world as they see it fit. If we are here on this podcast with white beards and we are like old and gray, we're going to talk about the Wall Street Bets because of what happened on Reddit. Reddit that people really don't give a hoots about. So that's what I think about that. So that settles that. Some of the other things that I've seen is, basically as you are going to market, know where your market is. Geographically, up market, downstream, and so on and so forth. Make sure some of the product marketing concepts apply to those things as well. Or try to have a bold mindset. There's still a lot of generic stuff going on in B2B right now because it's just so predictable, and I get it, but I think it's the brands that try to stand out that will grow, because people are slowly getting tired of of all that. Then the attribution side, please get a dashboard. This is not a plug. I've done some tests already. Get Databox, get Tableau, get Local Studio, measure what you can, integrate what you can. That's also key. Marketing simplicity is also very key as well. So you don't make it complicated at all. Back to attribution. While attribution by causality is the bone of B2B, we need to start borrowing for B2C, where they do attribution by correlation. There's no pixel, but I know if I stop running these TV ads, sales will go down. That's how it works. So attribution by correlation, self-reported attribution, which is kind of like attribution by correlation in my mind, because if somebody fills a form, how did you hear about us? Like Clay, I filled that form. How did you hear about us? And I said, it's Todd and Obadiah. And I was like, yeah, I just put that there. Hope they get promoted. So attribution by correlation, self-reported attribution with the hardcore data, is also, very, very key there. And basically, just going back to what we said at the beginning, I think marketing needs to start having that business acumen. Keep your common sense, keep the emotions and all those things that work in neuroscience and all that. Keep all those things, but you need to start to have that business acumen on how does my effort help with unit economics. It's not only the way to survive in your career, but is the one way for you to leave that CMO role. Maybe you do marketing for 20 years, and back in the day, when CMOs are CMOs, they retire. But nowadays, because some CMOs are now commercial in nature, they start to call them chief customer officers. They even make them the CEO of a specific market, or a managing director, because they've done a lot more than marketing. They've done products, they've done product management, they've done CX, they've done sales. They've touched all those aspects while still doing their marketing. So I think that will be the future, and anybody who is ready to jump with me into that very hot pool would survive. I think.
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned this like, in the interview that I heard with you, but it's this unique, if you go down this route and you dive into these disciplines, it has this ability, marketing affords this unique ability to sort of be on like the creative side, like tap into the creative brain, what's going to stand out, what's going to be, things that people don't forget and remember and tell on podcasts like this, like, oh, I saw Clay's, whatever. You've got that creative ability. You've got the buyer psychology part of it, but then you've also got this like hard intersection with like math and science. Like all of this has got to work and like meet the numbers and be done in a very like methodical way. So, yeah, I appreciate hearing you like break this down and how you think about it. Where can listeners go? Obviously, shout out the podcast. And do you have like any other places you want to send people who want to follow along with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dots, Dots, and my surname there is Oyebolu, Oyebolu. I'm on, just find me on LinkedIn. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram too, and YouTube. Or you want to find, Dots Loves Marketing. That's which is kind of the brand I'm pushing. I've got a website, dotslovesmarketing.com, and that's also imputed again in most places in the web. You'll probably find the connection of that and my name. The podcast is the Marketing Leadership Podcast. That's one podcast name that nobody took, so I took it.
Love it.
So the Marketing Leadership Podcast. I've had the pleasure of interviewing tons of folks. So it's an incredible blessing, and you want to enjoy it just like this one as well. So yeah, those are the places you can find me. If you've got any questions, send me a DM. I've got tons of free resources on my website as well. And let's see how we can help you out.
All right, awesome. And we'll link, if you're on the newsletter, Move the Needle, if you're subscribed there, we'll link to Dots LinkedIn. Probably put a link to the podcast and stuff like that, and you'll get a summary of this episode. So, all right, thanks so much for coming on. This was really fun, and looking forward to coming on your show hopefully sometime this year.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremiah. Thank you. And thank you so much, guys.